couple of minutes.
Okay, good. So all I was just while we're letting folks join the call, I'm going to just briefly introduce a couple of ground rules. So thank you all, first of all, for joining us early this morning in DC and late in the evening in India. We are very pleased to welcome you to this workshop, and we're going to try and keep it as efficient as possible given the online format. So you should have been muted automatically on your entry to the meeting, which is why you couldn't hear me. If you have turned off your microphone, I see there are a couple of folks whose microphones are on. If you could mute those, that would be great so we can hear the person speaking. And also, unless you're speaking, we prefer that you keep your video off just to manage the bandwidth. If you have a question or a comment, we're going to have 3 different discussion sections during the meeting today. You can interact a couple of ways. You can use the chat function to let us know that you have a comment you'd like to share, or there's a little hand button. If you hover over your name on the participant list, you can raise your hand and let us know that way, and then we will call on participants to share their questions and comments. Obviously, we'd appreciate to have as many people participate in the discussion as possible, so we would value your keeping your remarks brief and to the point to enable a rich discussion today. And if you do use that raise your hand button in WebEx, please remember to click it again after your comment is completed so that we know that your comment has been addressed. If you have any IT issues during the meeting, we have Rakesh Kumar online with us today from the Delhi IT team. You can send him a chat message directly on WebEx in case you're having any issues, and he'll be happy to help you out. And then finally, we just wanted to let you know that we are recording this meeting, and we plan to share the recording and a short summary after the event. So with that, I see that we have Kate online. So I'm going to turn things over to Kate to formally introduce the meeting. Catherine Hollyfield is an economist specializing in agriculture and natural resource management. She holds a Master of Arts in Economics from the University of Alberta in Canada. She started her career in the Canadian Public Service in the Federal Departments of Employment and Immigration and Finance. Catherine has worked at the World Bank in various capacities for over 21 years, serving as Senior Advisor to the Canadian representative on the World Bank Executive Board, as Senior Economist in the Central Policy Department, and as Country Program Coordinator in the Africa and East Asia Pacific regions. Catherine now serves as the Agriculture Practice Manager in the South Asia region, providing leadership and oversight to the agriculture and livelihoods programs in India and Sri Lanka. We're very glad to have Kate here today to welcome you all formally to this meeting. Kate, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mercedes, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody that's joined. On behalf of the World Bank Group, I would like to welcome you to this National Consultative Workshop on the Land Policy for Agricultural Transformation Study. Each of you has been invited here today because of your rich experience, your expertise, and your interests in this important subject. We really appreciate that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to be here. We are also very confident that your contributions to the workshop's discussions and deliberations will help us strengthen the study's relevance and policy impact. As you all know very well, secure land tenure is critical to achieving inclusive agricultural transformation. Yet we also know that many people living in rural areas of India lack tenure security. A recent study by the Global Land Alliance found that 1 in 4 rural homeowners fears losing their home, and nearly 20% of rural residents owning an agricultural plot worry about losing that land. The primary reason for these concerns is the lack of updated formal documentation of land rights. Moreover, only 10% of privately held lands is in the name of women nationwide, and despite encouraging trends in recent years, rural landlessness remains alarmingly high. Landless and marginal landholders still represent nearly 83% of rural households as of 2013. Importantly, land leasing can be an equitable mechanism for efficient farmers to access additional land for cultivation and we applaud the recent initiatives of the Government of India and several state governments to relax land leasing restrictions, allow tenant farmers to access agricultural entitlements, and promote a formal land leasing market. Numerous civil society-led interventions have also demonstrated promising pro-poor approaches for increasing farmers' access to secure agricultural land rights, including for female farmers. There are a number of promising initiatives that merit careful evaluation and, if deemed successful, could be scaled up to other states. World Bank has therefore initiated the study to do three things. First, to distill lessons from these reforms, as well as the experiences of World Bank investments in the sector in states where we have strong partnerships. Secondly, identify areas where such engagements could be stronger. And third, share this learning to strengthen our existing engagements and future state partnerships. More broadly, this study represents a key part of the World Bank's support to the agriculture sector in India, which aims to facilitate the transformation of the Indian farming system into a secure, resource-efficient, inclusive, and diversified rural sector. This means a sector that supports resilience and resource-efficient growth of the agriculture,
Kate, you're muted, Kate.
Kate, you're on mute.
Okay, I've got myself back on. I think whoever's controlling the meeting must be trying to mute everybody. I don't know how far I'm going to go back, but let me just start talking about the importance of this agenda during this COVID-19 pandemic. There is now an urgent need to more systematically identify tenant farmers to enable them to access emergency relief. The massive urban to rural migration in the country is also currently underlining the importance of strengthening land leasing markets to enable returning migrants as appropriate, as well as other vulnerable groups, to access arable land to potentially build their livelihoods. We thank you again for being online with us today to share your expertise and insights with the research team to ensure that the study's policy recommendations build on your work. We intend for today's workshop to kick off a series of development dialogues on land policy issues affecting the agriculture sector, and we look forward to sharing the results of the study at a future event later this year. Again, thank you very much for your participation, for your attention, and for your contributions to a productive dialogue today. Back over to you, Mercedes.
Great. Thanks very much, Kate. And apologies for the technical issue. We didn't miss much of your speech, I don't think. Thanks, Geeta is managing the mute function to make sure that we can all hear everybody. We are going to move to a hopefully brief and organized round of self-introductions. And that's because, as Kate just mentioned, one of the objectives is to have this dialogue kick off a series of discussions on land policy issues affecting the agriculture sector in India. And we really would like to contribute to building the community of researchers and policy influencers in this space. And so I'll start off to give you an example. My name is Mercedes Stickler. I am an agriculture economist with the South Asia region in the World Bank. And my work focuses primarily on our climate smart agriculture portfolio in India. My background is actually in environmental economics, but for the last 10 years or more, I've been focused mostly on rural land tenure and rural agricultural development in Africa, East Asia, and now South Asia. And I am the study leader in the bank team for this report. So now I'm going to go down the list just based on the participants list in WebEx as I see it on my screen. So Gayatri, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. This is Gayatri Acharya. I'm a lead economist with the Agriculture and Food Group Global Practice in the bank. yeah, I'm working with Mercedes on this report, and I basically have a background in agriculture and natural resource management. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Iftikhar?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Iftikhar Mustafa. I'm a senior agriculture economist in the bank, working in South Asia, in particular in India. I have background in economics, and I've been working recently on policies over macro policies and overall agriculture policies in India and on farmer organizations and farmer companies. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Jayesh Bhatia.
Good evening. I'm Jayesh Bhatia. I'm founder and director for NRMC. My colleague Pranab, who leads on the Center for Land Governance at NRMC, is a close colleague, and look forward to participating with all of you in this workshop. Thank you.
Great. Kate, would you like to add anything to your previous bio, or should we move forward?
You've heard too much about me already. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So let's go back up to the A's. We have, and I'm sorry if I butcher people's names, Akansha Jain? Akansha Jain?
Yes, hi, I'm Akansha. I work at Land Rights Initiative at Center for Policy Research with Namita Wahi, and I'm looking forward to attending this webinar and learning from all of you.
Great, thank you. Anirban?
Yeah, hi, this is Anirban. I co-lead Transforming Rural India Foundation, which is focused on bringing about multi-sectoral changes in villages of tribal and central India across multiple sectoral dimensions. Thanks.
Thank you. Anisa Jabu?
Hi, Mercedes. This is Anisa Drabu. I'm basically part of a small study. I was basically doing a study for the World Bank in the New Delhi office, where we were looking at women's land rights. And previously, I worked with Landesa for many years, and of course, know Pranab well, and have been together, organizing many sessions of the land conference. So I'm glad to be part of this, Mercedes. I heard a lot about the study and what's going on. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us, Anisa. Johnny Kumar.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Anjani. I work with the Gates Foundation, and I look at the, the committee portfolio of the foundation.
Great. Let's go back to Anjani Kumar Singh.
Sorry, I just introduced myself.
Oh, you have two names in this participant list. Okay.
So I am Anjani Kumar, working in IFRI, and just wanted to watch this.
Very good. Happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Arvind Padhi, Dr. Padhi from ICRISAT.
Hello everyone, this is Arvind Padhi. I'm basically a career civil servant, but now I'm the country director for ICRISAT. I have interest in the agriculture and rural development policy space. I have worked in this sector for 20 years in my previous roles in the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Aswani Kumar Munangi. If you're speaking, Aswani, we can't hear you. You may need to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Ashwini.
Yes.
I work with Pranab sir on this project, on the current project, and I have experience on implementing technologies in agriculture and land conservation.
Thank you. Bhargavi?
Hi, I'm Bhargavi. I work for the Finance Research Group, which is an interdisciplinary group of lawyers, economists, and people with experience in public administration. In the field of land, we are interested in the area of land and access to finance, and we've been focusing on land records modernization, tenure security, and welfare distribution linked to land records in the last 1 or 2 years. Happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Bhargavi. BK Agarwal.
Yes. I am BK Agarwal. I am Secretary to Government of India, presently posted in Lokpal. Otherwise, I independently research on land topics, land registration, title registration, etc. Recently, a book of mine, Land Registration, Global Practices and Lessons for India, has been published. So I am here just because I have interest in land issues. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Mr. Agarwal. Devika?
Hello, everyone. I'm Devika Bahadur. I am a consultant with the World Bank. I have been engaged on land issues for a while. I was helping to manage technical assistance on land governance some years back, worked closely with Pranab at that time, and some of the other people also, I think, who are joining us here today. I continue to be engaged with the sector off and on, working on land acquisition issues, and really looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dia Uday?
Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Hi. Hi, I'm Dia Uday. I'm a lawyer and a research consultant, and I work with the Finance Research Group. I work in the area of land and its intersection with finance. So to give you an example, we recently did a study on an income distribution scheme in Telangana, and that's the kind of work that we do. Very happy to be here and learn from everybody.
Great, thanks for being here. Dong Kyu Clark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dong Kyu Park, and I'm land administration specialist, work at Global Land and Geospatial Unit of World Bank. And I'm working on our land agenda in Asian country and very happy to join this important workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dong Kyu. Frank Pichel. I can see that you're unmuted, Frank, but we can't hear you. Maybe it's a mic issue.
Apologies.
There we go.
This is Frank Pichel from Cadasta Foundation, where we work on bottom-up approaches to community-based land documentation. We've been quite active in India and look forward to hearing some of the results of the study. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Frank. All right, so now I think we skip down to Kirti Mishra.
Hi, everybody. This is Kirti Mishra. I am part of a consulting organization called Ecotiate. We work in space of agriculture and related stuff. I used to work for World Bank as a consultant. I look forward to hear Pranav, a good friend of mine. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. Malcolm Childress.
Hi, everybody. Malcolm Childress. I'm Director of Global Land Alliance and Director of the Index study, which aims to collect data about citizens' perceptions of the security of property rights and land rights globally, and including India. Very glad to be here and learn about this study. Thank you.
Manivannan Patti.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Manivannan Patti. I work as a senior agriculture specialist based in Delhi office of the World Bank.
Brief and to the point, thank you. Mika Torhonen.
Good morning, thank you, Mercedes. My name is Mika Torhonen. I'm the World Bank's lead land specialist working in Asia region. We are having land administration, investment lending projects, and technical assistance also now increasingly in India. Looking forward to a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mridula Singh.
Hello everyone, this is Mridula Singh. I'm a senior social development specialist based out of the Delhi office, World Bank, and I work on land issues in India as well as in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Namita Wahi.
Hello everyone. I'm Namita. I head the Land Rights Initiative at the Center for Policy Research. I've been working in the land space for over a decade now, and Pranav is a great friend. We've actually worked together on the Indian Land and Development Conference for the last several years. This time we've organized it, and we presented our current work, one of which is on mapping all Indian land laws. And so we're working on a project where we are putting together land laws for 8 states in India and the center, and we've come up with over 1,000 laws. And the idea is, how do we make this archive of laws more accessible? We're also working on, we've done work previously in the areas of land acquisition and land rights of scheduled tribes in scheduled areas of India. We are currently trying to use data analytics techniques to see if we can, sort of speed up the process of analyzing comprehensive databases of cases. We've also done some work on women's right to property. We've been part of webinars with the World Bank and round lunch discussions, including most recently when Anisa was presenting her study. And also part of the Property Rights Research Consortium, of which Bhargavi and Dia and others are also part of. So really excited to be here, looking forward to the presentation, and of course have learned a lot from Dr. Huck and have worked with him also extensively. So looking forward to hearing him as well.
Great, thank you, Namita. Navin Kumar Amang.
Hi everyone, I'm Moveen. I work with NRMC as well, along with Pranav and Jayesh. My responsibilities are towards supporting research activities within the organization, and I look forward to hearing more from the sector experts.
Great. Similarly.
Hi everyone, I'm Sila. I'm a World Bank consultant, working social development consultant. I'm currently supporting a project in Assam, an agribusiness project. I also have done quite a bit of rights-based work, including land acquisition and livelihood, and work with Mozilla alongside most of these issues. Thank you.
Great. Pranav, would you like to introduce yourself? Yes, there you go.
Hello. I think I'll skip it because I'll continue the presentations. So, yeah, thank you.
Sounds good. Yep. We have a user who only entered their name as R. I don't know if you know who you are.
Hi, I'm Rahul Agrawal. I'm director at NRMC. Great to interact with colleagues across different organizations post the India Land Development Conference and to know that everybody is safe. Look forward to the deliberations. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rahul. Rakesh Kumar.
So please skip this. Thank you.
Okay. Ranjan Ghosh.
Yeah, hi. I'm Ranjan Ghosh. I'm an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Management, IIM Ahmedabad. And my both teaching and academic interests, research interests, over around food, land use change, agricultural topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ruchika Singh.
Hi everyone. I lead the sustainable landscape and restoration work at WRI India. So the larger focus of our work has been how do we transition towards a low carbon resilient landscape that can support sustainable land management through nature-based solutions like restoration, sustainable agriculture, resulting in flow of multiple ecosystem services as well as jobs and livelihoods. So we are also the Secretariat for the Food and Land Use Coalition in India, and with our partners TEDC, WN, IIM Ahmedabad, Ranjan was there before me. We're looking at how do we, in the Indian context, think about transformation of the India's food and land use systems, and this is the work that we are currently doing. And so very interested in learning more about the study findings, and of course, worked with Pranav before, and we also co-organize the India Land Development Conference. So looking forward to hearing that.
Great, thanks, Ruchika. Sabita Farida.
Hi, I'm Sabita. I'm working as the Gender and
social inclusion expert with FAO India. I'm working in a project which is focusing on biodiversity conservation and sustainable land and agriculture practices, particularly how to balance the environmental concerns while increasing the agriculture productivity. So, yeah, I'm interested on the land issues and working on the women land rights for years since my time with Oxfam India. Thank you.
Thank you. Samik, Sandra Das.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm Samik Das. I work as a Senior Rural Development Specialist with the World Bank.
Thank you. Shailesh Nagar.
Hi, everyone. This is Shailesh Nagar from NRMC. I work on issues related to natural resource management and project designing, implementation support, monitoring, evaluation, and research. Looking forward to deliberations.
Great, thank you. Shipra Deo.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shipra, based out of Lucknow, and I work with Landesa as Director for Women Land Rights. We've been working in collaboration with governments at state and national level for proper and gender-responsive changes in land governance systems. Thank you.
Great. And then Shreya Deb.
Hi, I'm Shreya. I lead Omidyar Network's work on property rights in India.
Thank you for being here. Suab Roy.
Hello everyone, I'm Saurav. I work on the issue of financial inclusion with the National Rural Livelihood Fund.
Great, thank you. And then we have a call-in from S. Ravani Reddy.
Hello everyone, I'm Shravani. I work as a project associate for Food and Agricultural Organization. I'm basically working on a green agriculture project, which focuses on transforming Indian agriculture for global environment benefits. Thank you for having me here.
Great, thank you. Subhash Chand. I think you're still muted, Subhash. Okay, let's try Sumita Cindy.
Hello, I'm Sumita. I'm an assistant professor at IIM Sambalpur, and I'm working on issues of natural resource governance. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I see Subhash Chand was able to unmute. You would like to introduce yourself?
Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Is it audible?
Yes.
Hello?
Thank you.
Hello, this is Subhash Chand. I'm from National Institute of Agriculture, Economics and Policy Research, which is based at Delhi. And I'm principal scientist. My discipline is agriculture economics, and I'm working on irrigation water management and watershed management in India. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sunil Simon.
Hello everyone, I'm Sunil Simon. I work with a program focusing on smallholder farmers issues, mainly on food security and climate change. And as you know, land is a major aspect in that. And the main work is with a network of organization called Caritas. So we work around South Asia region, and I lead this program from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Thomas.
Hello everyone, I'm Susan. I'm faculty at the Indira Gandhi Institute for Development Research in Bombay, and I work with Bhargavi and Dia at the Finance Research Group on the projects that they described. Primarily, the interest is on looking at how to improve the quality of land records so as to improve land transactions and in enabling better access to finance for the agricultural market linkages.
Great, thank you. And then we have Swati Dogra.
Hello everyone, my name is Swati Dogra. I work as a social development specialist with the World Bank. I work with Mridula, and recently I was involved in a study on Meghalaya, where we were trying to look at the customary, land tenure management and how it sort of interplays with the modern, land rights. So that's, my interest, and that's why I've joined this workshop.
Great. Thank you, Swati. Victoria Stanley.
So, hello, everyone. Victoria Stanley from the World Bank. I'm a land administration specialist. I've been working about 18 years now in the topic around the world, although not in India, unfortunately. So I'm very much looking forward to learning more today. Thank you.
Great. And then finally, Yugank Goyal.
Everyone, I'm Yugank. I teach at Jindal University in India. I work on policy issues, specifically on regulation and institutional economics. A lot of my research projects have led me to land issues of which I don't quite understand much. And so Ranjan Ghosh, who's here, was kind enough to send me the invitation for this. And I'm really here to learn about the issues of land rights and tenancy in particular. Thanks.
Great. So thanks everyone for being here and sharing your work with us. And we're looking forward to your contributions to the discussion. I'm going to turn things over now to Pranav Chowdhury, the study leader. And Geeta, if you could just cue up the slides. And maybe while she's doing that, Pranav, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Mercedes. Very good morning to those and good afternoon to our Indian friends. So very happy to see 48 persons. I was just trying to count joined, and we must be very happy, Mercedes, because we are not expecting that so many will be even coming into the physical face-to-face meeting that we would have organized. So I think thanks to, in a way, COVID, that this technology has brought all of us together, and we are so happy to have all of your time around this particular meeting, and we look forward to more than sharing our work, learn from your perspectives how we take it forward. Geeta, can you please share the screen? Yeah, I'm Pranav Chowdhury. I'm part of Center for Land Governance that NRMC started in 2015. And Geeta, it is, I think, the agenda. Can you switch to the presentation? Yeah, and I'm assisting this study led by Mercedes from the bank, and also under the guidance of Dr. Azamul Haq and Mr. Vinod Agrawal, and helping me are Mr. Ashwini, Rana Roy, and Naveen. So coming back to the study, actually this presentation is part of the study. It is not the whole study. Is not yet over. So this is the I think the first part of the study, where we tried to look at the tenancy reform and what is the status as of now, post the Land Leasing Model Act of Niti Aayog, and which has been implemented in some states. So this is basically the whole study is trying to look at the context of agricultural transformation that India is trying to witness. Geeta, we have to mute it.
काम का बोल रहा हूँ.
Yeah, Geeta, can you mute your?
Devika, I think, is unmuted on the mobile connection. If you wouldn't mind, Devika, leading, please. Thank you.
Yes, so this whole study, as already Catherine and Mercedes have introduced, is looking at how land policy reforms in agriculture, how insight into that can better inform the agriculture transformation that India is undergoing in the wake of doubling farm income, in the wake of high value crop diversification and value chain integrations. And particularly the objective of the study to see how land policy reform better inform not only the agriculture transformation, but while the transformation takes place around inclusion, and inclusion in the context of tenants, landless, women, and Dalits. So this is the scope of the study. And in that context, we are particularly keen to look at the continuum between farming, land, and farmer, land, and agriculture. So while the focus is on agriculture, it is through farmers, and we are looking at how land relations between farmer and land is really able to facilitate that. So as you can see in the screen, this presentation is divided into 6 parts. We have shared with you the draft report, but this will be a very brief presentation, and we'll try to keep it very short, within 20 minutes. So we'll be providing a broad overview of Indian tenancy context and its impacts on Indian agriculture as of now. Then moving on to the Model Land Leasing Act and the reform process that has been triggered post that in different states, and what are the learnings having been discussed around that. Then we move to little bit discuss about how the inclusion issues around women and Dalits are important in India, particularly historical land relations and the present patriarchal and caste relations. And then we move to our interesting part of the study, which has a lot of implication also in the present context of COVID, is that how the land relations are really addressing inclusion in agriculture and rural development schemes by central state government. We'll be looking at 4 schemes, 2 by Government of India and 2 by different states. Then we move to conclusion and recommendations. But beyond that, we'll also come back with some policy questions on which we are more excited to have your responses on that. Geeta, can you move to the next slide, please? So please go to the next first section. So I think all of us are quite aware about the land reform per se, or land redistributive reform that we often refer to in India, which started in post-independence in 60s with an aim to improve agricultural production and bring it more social justice in a that mindset, drawing from the reforms which were happening in East Asia, particularly Taiwan, Japan, China, and South Korea. But while those reforms in East Asia was successful and contributed to not only agricultural growth but also pushed up industrial growth, somehow the reform agenda in India remained unfinished, and particularly so for tenants and women, and if you look at the lower farm classes and the lower castes. So that has been a kind of challenge. And the way land reform laws were implemented in different states, they draw heavily from the colonial and pre-colonial land laws that were already in place. Like some states identified tenancies, recognized tenancies, some states completely banned it, and the different states evolved different kind of mechanism to identify some privileged persons who can be called as privileged rights, or can give the land on tenancy. For example, in Odisha, Lord Jagannath is a privileged right. So different states implemented differently, but what we find overall is that this banning and restricting tenancy, which was the main agenda behind land distributive reform to help land to the tillers, that was not very successful, and as a result of which tenancy continued, and rather informalities evolved in different forms as a reflection to farming context, bringing in different tenants relations. And as per different studies, around 30% of farmers in India are tenants, though many of the studies indicate that they are still very gross underestimates. For example, in Odisha, people tell that about 80% of the paddy growers are sharecroppers. So out of these tenants, if you look at, more than 90% own less than 1 hectare. About 36% are landless, and 54% they own less than 1 hectare of land. And this continued tenancy has been reflected in different studies, as also by the model, the protagonist of Niti Aayog's Model Land Leasing Act. It has led to increased following. It has led to reduced access, very highly constrained access of tenants to private and public agricultural services and entitlements, and which has resulted in a long-term negative impact on the farm investment and productivity. Geeta, can you next please? So if you look at some trends that has been come out of different studies, we find the tenancy has in fact increased. Particularly last 2 decades, data says that tenancy in India has increased, and it has increased in terms of leased area. We see a clear trend towards increase in fixed. As many of you knowing, there will be many different kind of tenancy, like fixed rate tenancy, which talk about fixed costs, or fixed share of the crop, or shared cropping. But we see that fixed rate cropping tenancy is increasing, and there has been also number of high tenancy holding. High tenancy holding are the holdings where the percentage of tenant land under tenancy is higher. That means many people also take on land on lease while owning some part of land. So as we saw that some farmers were already less than 1 hectare, they also lease in, and some landless also lease in. So the holdings where the tenancy per land is higher, they are also increasing. And there is a good sign also, longer term leases are increasing, those that are informal. And we also found there are many large farm size classes, particularly irrigated tracts. There is a reverse tenancy, like big farmers taking land lease out of small farmers. Recording of lease has started, maybe due to provision in some states, as well as some states started also bringing, like Andhra Pradesh License Cultivator Act in 2011. So there was some kind of recording of lease, but there was still remaining around 13%. The impact in terms of agriculture, you see there are studies by Huck and others which indicate that even the tenants do produce same kind of production like the owned land, but because of tenancy and because of particularly for people moving out of agriculture, moving to urban areas, there is increasing following of land, there is decreased and reduced agricultural investments because there is informal tenure arrangements. People don't have access to tenants, don't have access to formal credit. Like if you look at the landless database of SECC, the Socioeconomic Caste Census 2011, it talks about less than 1% of landless have Kisan credit cards. So while we find that about 30% tenants are landless, so they don't have access to Kisan credit cards. So as a result of which investment into agriculture has not been able to come in. And tenants also have limited access to Ministry of Agriculture Development Scheme that we'll discuss subsequently in coming slides also. And as a result of which agriculture productivity long-term and overall has reduced. It has also led to a very unfortunate incidence of increase in higher suicide rate. So we are trying to look at particular data of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and it was quite intrigued to see that while there is a higher percentage of tenants, there is also a higher percentage of suicide. So tenancy has also a link to suicides, which is becoming a kind of face of agriculture crisis in India. Can you please move to next slide, Geeta? Then all this thing led to this, Niti Aayog started thinking about Model Land Leasing Act and reforms. Geeta, next slide, please. Geeta, next slide, please. So this Model Agriculture Land Leasing Act, which Niti Aayog brought in, can you please come back to the earlier one? Yes, yes. Can you please come back to the earlier one? Earlier?
Hello.
I think.
Yes. Pranav, I am here.
Yeah, you have to come to slide number 8. Okay, so I'll continue when Geeta comes in. Slide number 8. No, I think you are moving ahead. Slide number 8. Before this, yes, thank you. So, okay, so the next slide, not this one. Okay, I'll continue with that. So one of the argument of the land redistribution reform is that if land is not given to the tiller, that will not lead to increased production and agriculture development. But as tenancy continued, Niti Aayog's argument was that, and most of the argument of land redistribution reform in post-independence was coming out of socialist motivation. So here, the argument of Niti Aayog here is that tenancy is not socially regressive. That means thinking that always the landlord will be expert the tenants and the relationship is not able to promote agriculture. It is not always true. So in the present context where tenancy continue, it has rather economic necessity, and in the change paradigm, particularly lessor and lessee, both can have a win-win scenario. And that argument led to the further argument that formalization of tenancy can also push up land rental market and can bring in stimulus to agriculture growth and transformation. Towards that, there was some kind of key provisions that the Model Act argued, because as many of you would be knowing, India's revenue code in many states, they talk about something called adverse possession, that if a land is under possession for 12 years, so the person in possession will be eligible for the ownership. And probably in many of the states, the landlords argued that if they have some kind of agreement with tenants, so it would lead to adverse possession, and that's why Riti have argued that the removal of adverse possession is necessary if you are trying to bring in land leasing reform. And at the same time, it made a kind of flexibility in the context of delegating the negotiation between around the lease terms, particularly lease duration, rent, and all other such conditions to the mutual agreement between owner and tenant. There was also a provision of automatic resumption so that landlord's interest is protected. And it also provided that based on the kind of agreement done, tenants will have access to agriculture credit, insurance, relief, compensation measures in case of crop failures. At the same time, it also advocated that the lease agreement should not be recorded in record of rights. So this is some argument which has also some kind of implication as you see in future in other slides. Another argument behind access to infra credit is that tenants will also be incentivized to improve investments in land. So far, after this was brought in 2016 by Niti Aayog, about 4 states, they have gone ahead with that. It was started with Madhya Pradesh, then UP, you've also brought in the state amendment now. Uttarakhand and Maharashtra, they have already introduced these amendments. Punjab, Odisha and Karnataka, they are considering that. And but Andhra Pradesh had brought in a similar act in 2011 called Land License Cultivator Act, which was again amended and repealed with a new act called Crop Cultivators Act in 2019. So that shows that there is a lot of learning coming up as a result of this act being implemented in different states, and which can be taken forward. Geeta, can you move to the next slide, please? So as you see, there are while leasing reform provided a kind of template, states as like the experience of land reform laws, the way the states brought in reform laws in their own diversities, even these land leasing reform laws also been have their own diversities states. If you look at the lease duration, so while it was argued by the Niti Aayog to be left to the tenants and the landlord, you see there are different kind of recommendations around that by the different acts, like 1 to 5 years. This new act of Andhra Pradesh talks about 11 months. So while the agreement between lessee and lessors were respected by some state directly, some states wanted it to be countersigned by revenue officer, while others wanted it to be registered under Indian Registration Act. The database of now is not maintained digitally. Either it is mostly local revenue office or Tahsil office. The Tahsil office is the sub-district office where the land records are maintained. The transferability, in terms of transferability of contract, in most cases it is not transferable. But in Maharashtra, while it is the lease is extended, co-leasing can also be included in that. In terms of access to entitlement, different states have explicitly underlined this kind of entitlement these farmers, tenant farmers will get. For example, Uttarakhand talks about all the entitlement from loan, insurance, relief to grant, while AP talks about loan and insurance, MP talks about relief. And in terms of repealing adverse possession, Andhra Pradesh recently repealed the 1956 Finance Act, and the other state revenue codes have been amended. Can you move to the next, please, Geeta? There is an interesting case we wanted to highlight because unlike other states which brought in the new act or amended earlier act to implement Niti Aayog's recommendation in 16 and 17, where not much data are available, there are some data available from Andhra Pradesh case where the License Cultivator Act was implemented in 2011. So there are some peer-reviewed papers available. So just to underline what has happened and how it has changed again with the 2019 Act. This act was actually one of the model act. It was very brief, in that it is 2-page act, and it advocated a tenure of 1 year or for the duration of the crop, which has a potential of also extension. The eligibility was that the farmers who raised the crop with expressed or implied permission of the landowner. So landowner's permission was not mandatory, but this was no record. So that has also a kind of implication that we'll discuss in the next point. Based on the agreement, based on the contract, a loan eligibility card was to be issued, and which would help them access credit, input subsidy, crop insurance, and compensation. But this act did not repeal the Epi Tenancy Act, which was allowing a kind of interesting advantage for tenants, that if for 6 years they would cultivate this land continuously, they have the option to purchase the land, tenants. And also if they continue for 12 years, they can own the land. So in case of LEC, based on the application of tenant, revenue officer can issue the LEC. Though it is desired that no landowner's permission is required, but in case landowner is unable to give permission, it can be verified in Gram Sabha and it can be taken up. So that was a kind of positive thing in case of LEC, which has been now changed in the new CCRC crop cultivator rights card. So we'll discuss about that subsequently. So while LEC was implemented, there was 39% estimated tenants they applied for LEC, and 29% were issued. So it is as per the study done in 2018. They looked at the study done in 2000. The data referred to 2014 and 15. The tenants and landlord had limited awareness, even if it was there. So the awareness was limited. That was one of the reasons why the authors argue that it was not very successful. Many places, landlords also blocked the tenants from registering, fearing that they could be used to eventually claim ownership. So landlord didn't allow even tenants, though it was not mandatory, but they don't allow them, and tenants out of fear, they didn't go for registration. And also bankers were not much aware, though government has issued a letter to all financial institutions, but many bankers were not also issuing loan based on that. So this act since been replaced now with this crop cultivator rights card and act, which has now repealed both this act, this 11 Act and 56 Tenancy Act. And here it has made mandatory that this agreement to be done between landlord and tenants, and then countersigned by a revenue official, and reduced the period to 11 months. So there has been a lot of argument that many crops have a longer period and the tenants will have reduced incentives. So this act so far has poorer performance, and in many cases, landlords are now manipulating the contract and executing contract in name of their own relatives to get benefits. So this is, but still early days. So this is some kind of insight coming in. Gita, can you move to the next one? So if you look at the modern land leasing reform that has been argued by Niti Aayog and early experiences, so there are some critics. These critics are like the land reform law was failure. So, and is it a good idea to replace the ownership right with only tenant right, or both the redistribution and tenancy should be argued at the same time? Then there has also been an indication that there is a increasing absentee landlordism happening, with most of the people migrating to the urban areas, and there is a kind of speculation which is not based on which the landowners are not willing to give their land on leasing. So they are just looking at the store value of land versus the productive asset of land. So that has also been documented in a study. So will tenancy reform able to address this land leasing reform? Third was that this land leasing reform may not have immediate impact on the fallow land, because there are different kind of leasing conditions and leasing tenancy relations. So the argument of Niti Aayog was that if land leasing act come up, so fallow land will reduce. So the authors have argued here that fallow land may reduce, but then not immediately. So it may take some time, and we have to adapt to see how we facilitate that. There is also argument that because there is a power relation in Indian society, caste relation in Indian society around land, so if we leave the negotiation to lessee and lessor, so being landlords always being more powerful, so tenants' interest may be compromised. And there is also a kind of recommendation that looking at women's rights and Dalit rights, which we'll be discussing subsequently, that we need to also have some kind of measures to see how this local customs along with Tenancy Act. So it has to be very proactively implemented in involving local stakeholders. So there is also an argument that reverse tenancy is also will help many small farmers and marginal farmers to come out of their farming and easily go to urban areas to earn more income. but there has been studies which indicate that large farms have lesser productivity in compared to small farms. So the scale factor doesn't work in Indian farms. So there is a lot of studies and emphasis around that. And at the same time, the experience of AP License Cultivator Act indicates that the adverse position need to be repealed if you need to look at registering tenants. And now they have already repealed in the case of 19 Act, but we have to see how it is helping. There are also interesting insight in terms of implementation act of in UP and AP. There are some studies which states that the status quo continue because awareness has not been much. Bankers are not also aware of that. And that also leads us to say that we need to have more information. The status of implementation by the states are also not much available. They are not recorded and reported easily like in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, Uttarakhand. So we need to look at more intensely to see what kind of learning is coming out. Maybe some primary studies would be required around that. Can you move next, Gita, please? So while we discuss about land tenancy, one thing we must also look at about the land record reform that Government of India has been pursuing as a move towards conclusive titling and trying to better link to land market and also see how these shared assets can be converted to better capitals. So in that context, if you look at the land record reform, that has probably not very well able to capture and discuss and reasons. And we also believe that along with the time updating what is being done, tenancy reform need to be also integrated. So if you look at the land reform that has taken place, so land policy reform, land record reform, and agriculture transformation connections have been limited. For example, if you look at women land right, in women land right, we have got very proactive amendments and laws coming in, but integration of women name in the land record through addition of gender column have been highlighted, but not has been aggressively pursued. So there has been a similar in tenancy. So between land policy reform, land record adoption, and agriculture transformation, the relationship have not been very strong. If you look at the progress of DLRMP, the studies have been done recently in CIR, and I think even the study of Susan, Bhargavi, and Dia also highlight something. So while there has been 90% of the land records, like existing records have been digitized, the spatial digital cadastral maps are only 50%, and their linkage is limited. So in a way, the updating and inclusion has been one of the challenge of DLRMP. Updating in case of linking mutation and also taking a resurvey, we find very less work has been done around that. Mutation linkages are less than around 50% and resurvey is around 12%. So that means when records have been digitized and not updated. At the same time, women land rights and tenancy has not been created. So if you look at the leasing documentation practice, vary from state to state. Some states, thanks to their legacy, they have something called RTC, which is like Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, where they have record of tenancy and cultivation, where tenancies should be updated every year. And in contrast to that, West Bengal, Odisha, with rights of records, you don't find tenancy record. Because RTC that used to record regularly earlier, where every department has now been left to record to agriculture, so records has not been very updated in that context. So there are multiple agencies involved in leasing. For example, agriculture department, the census, they look at tenancy, whereas revenue department doesn't look at tenancy much. And it has been a low priority for many state governments. So because the data has no link to revenue collection, sales collection, and as such, revenue collection has been replacing sales collection, and it is not much. It is very less. So there is no incentive for state to update the records around that. The data around tenants is mostly collected for statistical purposes, and there are some issues around that also. For example, if you look at women land rights, as per the gender of the household, there are issues around also, methodologies around that. If you look at the existing government initiative, they are most unlikely to record land lease because DLRMP has less incentive. At the same time, Land Leasing Act also recommends that recording lease should not be done in land records. So that is a challenge, that we have to see how to address. At the same time, when states are going up, like the interesting study that Bhargavi and did to Susan in Telangana, this land record updating program that was done, and the record time of 3.5 months, they updated all the other passbooks. So they find that it avoided tenancy, and they also just look at updating the textual record. So when you try to take up scale and speed, probably inclusion may be one of the casualties. Can you go next, please? So now we discuss about the inclusion of women and Dalits in land policy reform. So I'll just try to move quickly. With the next slide, please. If you look at women land rights, so it is a key issue. With the next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yeah. If you look at the women land rights, so now in India, women are also identified as farmers, thanks to a lot of advocacy by this women land right and this women activist groups. But still, it remains more in the paper than in practice. Patriarchy and social conditioning continue. Land record still doesn't maintain sex decided data, and culturally, you see in the field, there is very limited practice. Even as per the Hindu Succession Amendment Act, the day the girl is the daughter is born in a family, she becomes the she has the right over the land. But you find suo motu mutation is not happening, so many states are not working around that. So and while most of the women are the agricultural workers, about 65%, they only own, as per agriculture census 2015, only 14% of land holdings. So that is something which is a big challenge. So there has been a lot of initiative around that, but still the disparity continues. For example, joint by planning commission from 6 plan period, this thing is in place where the joint started, but it is restricted to homestead land, not really mainstream forest right, and also argue about giving rights to both. But there are many studies which indicate that hardly 20% of the forest, individual forest right record within land. There has been stamp duty subsidy in states like Delhi, Himachal, Odisha to encourage women to recording land in the name of men, women with either subsidy or waiver completely. Stamp duty in India is very high, 7.5%, but still you find that has not been much. There has been interesting initiative like with state rural livelihood mission, land design, West Bengal has been training SHG groups to help them record land, record women's name in land records, which is possible for the present legal scenario, and they are trying to cover over 3.8 million women around that. So this is started, so we have to see how it is progressing. Even this Aranda Act, LAR Act also talks about recognition of separate unit. There has been a slow increase, gradual increase, but it is very slow. Like if you look at 2011 agriculture census, there are 12% of women owning land. Now it is 13.9%. So it is increasing, but it is very slow, and a lot needs to be done around that. Gita, can you move to the Dalit slide, please? Like women, India are also facing a lot of barriers to land, owning agricultural land. So it continues even India discussion. Dr. Balasaheb Ambedkar, who wrote Constitution of India, he also one point of time he argued for Dalits, fighting for the right, because he found that upper caste are not willing to give their land. So if you look at the data sets are really worrisome. 60% Dalit households, they don't own any farmland, 13, and 70% farm laborers, they work on the farms of others. Only 9% cultivable land they own, while 61% of the parcel less than 2. So they own less land, they own poor land, they don't own agriculture, irrigated lands, and if you look at particularly even while they are trying to buy the land, they also don't get good lands. And during distributive reform, a lot of land was given to them, but they have not been able to take position. So there has been some initiative by states to ensure those positions. In Bihar, there is an operation giving position which has been successful, where police was involved in doing camps in the villages and providing the position. Similarly, better implementation of land reform in West Bengal also enhanced Dalits' land rights. So that shows that if there is a political will and there is administrative reform, this can be informed, this can be done, improved. Similarly, land purchase scheme in Telangana, where government is purchasing land and giving to Dalit, this kind of thing can be taken out. Can you move to the next slide, please? So now we'll be going to the agricultural and rural development schemes, where of late, lot of agriculture and rural development schemes trying to bring in inclusion are looking at land record as a source of eligibility criteria, and being these schemes being digitized and more in many cases relying on DBT. They also look at digital land record and digital database to transfer the benefits and ensure entitlements. So that has clear implication on tenants, women, and Dalits whose names have not been reflected in land records. And we looked at 4 schemes in this contest, in case of Government of India, PM Kisan and NRLM, and in states, Kalia and Raitu Bandhu. And we'll see in the next slides how these schemes have performed in the contest of inclusion. Geeta, next slide, please. So if you look at PM Kisan, I think this is one of the biggest scheme in terms of DBT, which talks about transferring 6,000 Indian rupees in 3 installments of 2,000 each to small and marginal farmers who own less than 2 hectares of land. And basically, objective is to ensure crop health and achieve good yield. So the eligibility criteria include land records, but the database is based on the agriculture census data. So based on the agriculture census of 2015-16, they have extrapolated and arrived at a figure of 125 million farmers to be provided with this benefit. But as of now, maximum 90 points, so this is corrected, 91 million hectares, 91 million farmers have been covered so far in the first introduction maximum, but then it was to be reduced because they also found some errors in that. And I was also sharing in case of COVID, how when it was targeted to reach about 86 million hectares, so they have reached only 79 million hectares. So there is a challenge in terms of reaching out to the farmers, and moreover, this small farmer database also exclude tenants and women. And in that context, our recommendation is that if some kind of tenancy can be recorded in DLRMP, so that will be helping better passing of benefits to the farmers. And but in that case, we have to see how DLRMP and Land Leasing Act draft of Niti Aayog need to be addressed, because as of now there is no such provision. At the same time, tenants can also be registered through Panchayat Raj institutions. So there is also another option we'll discuss in Kalia, where we look at some kind of databases instead of recording it. Can we also link agent database to address it? Can we move to next one, Geeta, please, for the NRLM? So looking at NRLM, we find that in NRLM there is a special scheme targeting women farmers. It is called Mahila Kisan Sashaktikarana Pariyojana. But here the proxy is that SSG members. So land ownership is not very clear. So it is that if women SSG members are getting the benefits, so they are presumed as women farmers. And here the credit is given to the groups. So that has also some kind of limitation on the individual financial inclusion of women, because in many cases, though they get credit on their group, credit for the group, but getting collateral on their land for some other thing is limited. Similarly, we also found some cases where while registering women for FPO as a farmer producer organization, because the Office Bureau of Farmer Producer Organization need to provide the land records. So if women lack to land record, that can be also sometimes a barrier. That was study in Maharashtra evaluation of NRLM that has highlighted that aspect. So in that context, some recommendations emerging is that if we can support women farmers, support women, particularly landless and farmers, and help their recognition as farmer by including their name in the land records, like what Landesa is doing, and also same times like also doing the joint titling. And in that context, there are a lot of examples like the way paralegals are working in Gujarat by WJWLO and Landesa's case. So SHGs can be trained to facilitate that. Geeta, can you go to the next slide? So Kalia has been the one scheme among all the direct benefit transfer schemes where exclusively, it is more inclusive because it clearly mentions about landless agricultural labor and sharecroppers to be included in the scheme. To do that, Kalia has used technology. They have looked at almost 30 to 40 databases and used machine learning and artificial intelligence to see if tenants can be included. In case of Odisha, they have looked at the paddy procurement database, record tenants also based on a certificate by landlord or panchayat. And based on that, and they also did a very excellent thing, the way they took up the IEC campaigns, information, education, communication campaign and public awareness, and the way Kalia is known to everyone in Odisha, and that has also improved the scheme implementation. And it is claimed that 1.5 million sharecroppers and landless farmers have been benefited out of estimated 5 million. Still a long way to go, and because still in Odisha, sharecroppers is banned, sharecropping is banned. So people argue that 80% of sharecroppers, there's a big number of sharecroppers who are unable to get the benefit because their name is also not included in paddy procurement database because the landowners are not helping. Can you move to the next one, for Rohit Bandhu, please? This is a scheme which has been evaluated very well by this finance research group by GIDR. So we just looked at the secondary information. These are all their based on desk research. So this is the first DBT scheme in India, which really triggered other DBT scheme around farmers. So it is area-based transfer. So if more land the farmer own, the more money is transferred to them. Their inclusion is based on land records. And to do that, before the scheme was launched, Telangana government went ahead with the land record updation program, which was very ambitious, and they did successfully in 3.5 months by updating the Pattadar passbook, which are a person's land record. A person has many land records in different RTCs, but they are put together in Pattadar passbook. So that was updated, and based on that, the scheme was promoted. But as you see, tenants, because they were not included in Pattadar passbook, so tenants are excluded. So there has been good coverage of the scheme in terms of overall beneficiaries which are eligible, but in terms of inclusion, that issue remains. And we also realized that while this survey was being done, this Bhari survey, which was this LRUP, they also did a survey called Raitu Samagra survey, where Agriculture Department tried to document tenancy and crop database, which included tenants. So this could have been probably used if they want to reach out to tenants. And this lessons of LRUP, though they have limitations, but have still a lot of potential to be learned by others, because it was a time-bound program. The way it was scaled up, it was a lot of lessons. So these are the kind of our observation. Based on that, we'll be moving to conclusion and recommendations. So Geeta, can you please move to the next slide? Yeah, next one, please. So while looking at the yes. While looking at the tenants, yes.
This is Dr. Sak this side. If you want me to talk, I think this is the best time. Otherwise, I think my phone will say no. There is some problem already. I adjusted whatever energy was there in the 3 hours conference that I had in the Ministry of Environment.
Sir, I'll just finish in 2 minutes. Will it be okay? So then we can.
Yeah, you try to finish, because otherwise I think I have an energy problem. I think let me see if I can again get some additional energy here. Okay. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. So we try to see if there is a pattern, though there are studies indicate there are limited pattern, there is less pattern around the way tenancy is coming in, but we could see there are some patterns, though further research is required. So these patterns have been explained here, so I'll not go in detail because Dr. Haq will be also highlighting about that. Can you move the next slide? Geeta, next slide, please. So based on the pattern, we found that there is a relationship between tenancy context and tenancy relations. So this is between the tenancy context could be like high risk context, rain-fed, lesser development of less agriculture developed economies where market is imperfect. There are more tenants, are smaller marginal farmers, more sharecroppers, more fallow land, and low risk context could be irrigated farming situation. So there is a kind of linear scale. In the x-axis, even the y-axis, we say that there is a lower return to higher return where there is more secured lease terms for higher return and less secured lease terms for the lower return. So in that context, we find these 4 quadrants and we feel they provide exciting learning for the states who can do little bit additional research to bring in some other data so that they can take up a graded approach to see what kind of reform and how to prioritize that. So that we can take up during the question and answer, because I will not move into detail into that. Dr. Huck will be also talking that. So just last 2 slides. Geeta, can you move quickly? I will summarize the recommendations. So in terms of land leasing reform, our recommendation based on this desk study, which need to be further backed up with the field study later, is that looking at the diverse context, we need more research to bring in more information, which will probably help us in take up a gradual and adaptive approach. An incremental approach to tenancy reform is required. Instead of jumping into tenancy reform, states can look at their issues even within their geography. We also look at like whether they need to give to sharecropper or marginal farmers or to address fallows. So there can be priorities based on which reform can start and gradually expand. At the same time, while bringing in reform, we have to also see if there is necessary amendments are brought in around adverse possession and other laws, and also to see if tenancy terms can be better adapted to the landless and small farmer because of the power equation. And there's a very big needs because through my contact, I also tried to investigate in fields, talking to farmers in MP and other states. We found awareness is very low about the tenancy reform, land leasing reform, so which need to be taken up in a big way through IC campaign, the way Kalia did in Odisha. And particularly Panchayat reform has a huge potential to be involved and address dispute resolution in this land license cultivator act. Already they were involved, so those kind of learning can be brought in. And we also feel that this land leasing reform can be complemented with better strategy to address following. There is a big potential to develop a land lease database and share with bankers and others to really improve the land rental market. At the same time, to complement the leasing reform, will bring in more service providers active at the field level like paralegals, and also link into the private sector to see how can an ecosystem be created around the tenants. Can you move to the last slide, please? Next one. So in terms of ARD schemes, there's some questions also will be raising around that. We find that inclusion of tenants in the scheme need not wait for the legal reform. There is a potential drawing from Kalia scheme. Probably we can look at relevant data. For example, agriculture census as a database in most states has a population database where they look at each farmer and record the tenants, which they don't report. They report in the that report available Tehsil wise, but they have a background database which records all tenants. So can it be used the way Kalia used paddy procure database to really improve access of tenants, PM Kisan and others? And can we also involve the PRI to validate the database in a more democratized format? And can you also see wherever possible, like Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, where RTC provision is that, can tenants be recorded? Similarly, in case of women farmers, probably bringing in with SSG and paralegals to train them and help recording women land right, which is already legal, so it can be done with investment of NRLM and others very easily. And this can be a kind of time-bound program like LREP to ensure inclusion of women, and at the same time also work on sex-decided data to improve the reliability and the right representation of down situations in the data. So I'll close here, and I think there will be many questions. So what we can do? Okay, so I think this slide I will not discuss now. Maybe in the COVID context, as already highlighted by Catherine, we see there is a lot of implication in COVID context. Today, in fact, we wrote a piece in Financial Express with Dr. Arvind Padhi. I can share that with you, so you can have a look at that. But I leave it to now Dr. Huck to give his opinion, and the questions we can take up later. Sir, please continue, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
Pranav.
Yes, sir.
You want me now to say something? I think this is maybe 5-6 minutes you have said. So, and I must compliment you for this deep interest in this kind of study, and a lot of materials you have already collected. So I will not go into those details. I will straightway come to some of the critiques of land leasing reform that you have mentioned, because I need to answer that, and then come to some of your conclusions and recommendations. You have said in this, based on maybe some information and studies, that whether this formalization of land leasing is sufficient to secure tenant some kind of livelihood. The point is, once it is legal, it is much more secure than where it is not legal. Say, for instance, now, if it is informal leasing, it is never secure. Anytime the tenant can be evicted, and even in between, without any knowledge. But if there is a lease agreement under a formal leasing of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, in the case of Uttarakhand, I think we did not mention, at one go, up to 30 years of leasing is permitted for high-value crops for enterprises. But for other seasonal crops, yes, in some cases it is 1 to 3 years, in some cases up to 5 years. So that is reasonable, because seasonal crops only will have a short duration. But for some of the high-value crops, up to 30 years, this has been permitted. And it can be further renewed. It is not just one-time lease and then everything is over. So those things need to be understood very clearly, because now agriculture is not merely seasonal crop farming, but also we are thinking of high-value crops and transformation towards that kind of high-value agriculture. So this is one. Second thing is, you said whether it will encourage, and no, even in the context of livelihood, you have seen how the poor women's groups in Kerala under Kudumbashree has improved their livelihood significantly. I think there are several studies, including a study by me. So I think that way, I think that should ensure you that this helps improve the poor people, particularly the tenant farmers' livelihood and income. Second thing is that you have said it may encourage absentee landlordism. Now, friends, I think I will tell you that in the last 70 years after independence, that kind of power relations you are talking still now, that landlord versus poor tenant, that is no longer true. I mean, that kind of power relations has changed significantly over time. Now even some of the, you go to West Bengal, even a poor tenant is much more powerful than a landlord who has given his land on lease. So this is not that the same kind of old power relations continues. So in that case, and suppose a class 4 employee in a government of India or a state government leases out his land to another poor man, and then you will call him an absentee landlord. It is not true. He may go back again after once he loses his job here, or once he retires, or again he changes his mind, agriculture becomes profitable, he may go back. So that kind of flexibility should have. So that is why we are saying land leasing becomes legal, in which there is no fear on the part of the landowner to lease out land when he leases out, and absolutely his land remains secure with him. And also for the agreed lease period, that kind of security also exists with the tenant farmers who cultivate the land. But we don't give him the ownership right, land to the tiller kind of thing, with which we started. That is not the kind of thing we are pleading currently in the policy reform framework that we are suggesting. So, for say, if a tenant has leased land for 30 years, as in Uttarakhand, for some high-value crops, so during the 30-year period, his lease cannot be terminated just like that. So he will be as secure as a landowner. But as soon as the lease period is over and neither the landowner nor the tenant farmer is interested to continue or renew, then that terminates. So I think there are things that needs to be done. Second thing, again, third thing you have said, it may not have any immediate impact on fallow land. As you know, if why we have said this, if the land leasing becomes legal, then people will not keep their land fallow. Why? Because now currently they keep the land fallow because thinking that they will lose the land if they lease out illegally, because it is illegal. If once it becomes legal and formal, they will have no fear, and as a result, they will be able to, after all, by keeping land fallow, they don't gain. If they lease out land to somebody, he, I think, gains in terms of getting some rent out of it. So he will not keep his land fallow. The main reason many people say for land being fallow is that sometimes many farmers, they don't have the capacity to keep, cultivate the land, or because of the resources, because of the shortage of labor, or because of nobody is there, they are old, or all kinds of things. But then whatever it is, if there is a legal framework for formalization, nobody will keep their land fallow because it is economical to lease out land and get some money out of it. This is one. And it is in the context of India, nearly 25 million hectares of land currently remains fallow. Of course, it includes both current fallow and permanent fallow, but still, I mean, if we say permanent fallow kind of thing also, I think it is huge, 50% or so. So I think this is the context. Then again, you have said how we include local customs, perpetuating the women and what is that? Dalits. How do we include women and Dalits? I think that is possible. Women, as I said, in the case of Kerala, they have already done it under Kudumbashree. Dalit farmers also, maybe women groups or some other groups, maybe otherwise men or women, whatever is the mode. I think they can lease in land independently, or individually, or collectively, whatever way they want. So I think that is possible. And what happens is that if you are having some manpower in the village, I mean the labor in the family, and you don't have land, so you tend to get some land by way of leasing in land if there is a proper legalized land leasing frame. If it is not there, then of course there is a constraint. So that all land leasing reform, what we are suggesting, that will certainly help improve the poor people's access to land. That is the idea. Idea is that under the traditional redistributive land reform frame, under ceiling and all that, that is no longer relevant or possible today, both because political willpower will never be there, and also the land, the big land lord we are talking about, is no longer there many. There are some, but again, due to division and fragmentation of land, that has been distributed within the family. So I think we should not talk about those things anymore. In fact, that is why we say there is the relevance of land leasing reform, which will allow the people to improve their size of holding by leasing in land, and also the landless people, they can also lease in land because they have labor, and also if the institutional credit facility is available, they will be able to cultivate land. And as I said, currently informal tenants, they don't have access to institutional credit facility, they don't have access to insurance facility, crop insurance, they don't have access to disaster relief. So at least if this is legal, then and recorded properly in a legal frame, they will be having this kind of access, they'll be able to improve their productivity and income, and they will come, maybe at least it will help them to come out of poverty or to some extent reduce their poverty level. So these are the kind of things for which I think I will say you must not put those restrictive ideas against the land leasing reform, wherever it is coming or whatever is the source. This is one. Second thing, when you say about AP Land License Cultivators Act, I have written extensively on that. I've also presented a paper of some 5 years back in the World Bank Conference. This is not doable or does not really help. I think it still exists because of one or two officers in the government of Andhra Pradesh said they did it, so I think this must continue this way. Point is, why should land leasing agreement between the landowner or the tenant be renewed every year, first of all? The point for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, renewed. In many cases, it is just the government agriculture department, they took some initiative to identify tenants and give them some benefit. They tried to do it. Some tenants got some benefit, but still it is a negligible percentage. We did a very comprehensive study in Andhra Pradesh some few years back and found that hardly 15 to 20%, of those who had loan eligibility card got credit. That was the major kind of objective of this. But even that objective was not met. Forget about nobody, not even a single tenant farmer or licensed cultivator got insurance facility or even disaster. In Telangana, both, because earlier that time Andhra Pradesh and Telangana formed the part of the same estate. Telangana today, as you know, even the scheme that you are talking about, right, about this scheme, no tenant farmers is recognized, and they are not getting any benefit of this because the tenancy is not recognized, tenancy is not recorded, and there is no legal framework. So what I'm saying, unless you change your tenancy reform, include the whatever you have done in terms of identifying the tenants and all that, have a special drive. I don't mind that, but then include it in the broad tenancy reform that should be undertaken in Andhra Pradesh. I told Chandrababu Naidu also once very closely, chat with him for about 1 hour, and but then again he depends on his some of the bureaucrats who does not have faith in this kind of thing. They think whatever they have done, that is the final thing. So I think there we are stuck. So I think Andhra Pradesh also has to have a flexible system of land leasing reform that we have suggested in the Model Land Leasing Act. But then again, as I said, each state can have some flexibility. I don't say the context could be a little different in some places. As I said, if it is a high value agriculture kind of situation which the state wants to promote, then the lease period can be allowed up to 30 years, 50 years, 99 years, or 100 years. So I think this is what I broadly wanted to tell. But then regarding land record, you have seen the state. We started updation of land record and digitization of land record scheme in 1989 as on pilot basis. And then we have been continuing in different forms. And until today, there are states where even not to speak of updation of record, even digitization of whatever record exists, that has not been completed. You have seen the study of NCR also, the gaps between the truth and what is shown in the records. In many cases, the benefits of some of these schemes are not reaching the poor people, particularly tenant farmers, and even otherwise, even the actual owners. Because if my land in the name of my grandparents and still land has not been recorded in my name, I think I don't get any benefit. So land record reform is equally important, of course. We are also thinking in terms of land titling and all that, conclusive land titling. But say even formal updation of land record and digitization of land record, if that is completed in a proper manner, in a participatory manner, I think that will be a good job. And I think I'll just stop here. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Just to introduce to all others, because sir was.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I think I have to recharge my mobile. You continue the discussion if you want me to speak. Still something, or if there is any question, I'll be happy to answer, but quickly.
Please be there. Please be there for some time. There may be some questions. So Dr. Haq is the architect of land leasing reform in India. So he was the chair for land policy cell with Niti Aayog, and he drafted the Model Land Leasing Act. And he has been also very active in pursuing with states to bring it ahead. So he has also been the advisor to this study. So if there is any question to Dr. Haq, we can take it quickly, and other questions we can take subsequently.
Pranab, can I ask something?
Please go ahead.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Pranab, and thank you, Professor Haq, for such a detailed and very deep down understanding of land leasing. I feel we've been in this conversation for some.
Namita, your speaker is mute. Can you please unmute and speak?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I start? You didn't hear anything, right? So should I start again? What I said?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pranab and Professor Haq, for your very in-depth presentation on all that we need to do to fix this issue of land tenancy and land records. We've been having this conversation for some time now with Professor Haq. I remember in the India International Center when we first, had this consultation where some of the people here were also present. So there are three thoughts that just come to mind. The first is, Pranab, you mentioned that this work has been done. The study that you have presented, which was very, very helpful, is not a field-based study. It is just based on, desk-based research, right? Because my own sense is that the field-based research may actually change some of the things that, you have presented. And so I would really look forward to that. So to Dr. Haq, sir, actually, it's from, if we go ahead along the route that you are describing, basically you're saying that the original goals of land reforms and land redistribution, we can say goodbye to, which was that actually land should be redistributed. So that itself is something that I'm not sure everyone has a buy-in with, because just because something is, not something is being held up because of various kinds of vested interests doesn't mean that we should not still pursue that objective. So that's number one. Number two, one of the criticisms
that is true. I think I have only to say on this. Politically, it is not feasible in the present context. Second thing is land, the surplus land that we have been talking about. There was a time when you used to say about 20 million hectares of land will be, available. So far, we have seen hardly, 2 million hectares of land have been distributed, and there is 1 lakh acre of land is under litigation. That is the only thing. If it is settled in favor of the, beneficiaries, then it is okay for the state. That is all right. Otherwise, there is no scope.
So, then, one of the, as you know about our 1,000 land laws project.
Anyway, the market, if there is an active land lease market, there will be more and more people who are willing to lease out land. There will be more and more people, at least the poor people, even the marginalized small farmers, they will be improved to, able to lease in land and improve their economic size of holding, and also the landless people also in some cases, you have their labor and if they have access to institutional credit, they will do that.
So one of the critiques what you are saying is, and was mentioned in that workshop as well, is that what you are proposing will actually make it easier for corporates to grab land. Because when you create an active land market, that's whom it's going to benefit, and particularly in states like Punjab, where we have a lot of.
Anyway, whatever is the questions or suggestions, I think we'll be happy to incorporate. I'll talk to Pranab again. By my mobile now, I think it's going to be totally discharged. I attended another 3 hours conference in the Ministry of Environment. So
right, sir.
I take leave maybe unless you have quickly something.
Thank you very much for being with us this late into the evening. We'll be happy to follow up with you afterwards if there are any remaining questions on your remarks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Great. Just in the interest of time, excuse me, Namita, I was just going to say, yes, let's do a quick round of questions so Namita can finish her question, and then let's spend maybe 5 minutes or so if there are any sort of clarifications to the presentation that Pranab delivered. And then we'll try and spend the remaining 15 minutes on more of an open policy question discussion following the policy questions that were highlighted in the background note to this workshop. So Namita, if you could just briefly finish up your question, and then if there are other questions on the presentation, we'll spend about 5 minutes. Then we'll move to Dr. Padhi and his remarks in the open policy discussion.
Sure. So just the two questions. One is about corporate, corporate takeover of lands. That is one of the big critiques that is made against the land leasing laws. The third thing is just on what I wanted to just understand from you, Pranav, was that, there are so many states that have laws that record tenants' rights, just that they are not reflected in the land records because the administration is not complying with the law. So the tenancies are supposed to be recognized as legal entitlements in many states. Sir, Professor Haq mentioned West Bengal. West Bengal has those laws for sure, and other states do as well. So I was just wondering, like, what am I missing here? And finally, I just wanted to say, the discrepancy between the field narrative and what you hear in the general policy circles for instance, when we were doing work in Jharkhand, and that relates to a question, you talk about Dalit rights and women's rights, but what about tribal land rights? Are you looking at that as well? And just, in Jharkhand, for instance, there's this constant stuff that is being said that, Jharkhand is being held up, the poverty levels and so on are because they have these restrictive land laws that do not allow a land market. But when we were doing field work in Jharkhand, there was so much resistance to amending those laws, and everybody said that the poverty levels would be a lot higher if these laws allow for the creation of a market. In other words, the tribal people in Jharkhand were completely resisting this policy narrative, which was very much entrenched in the government and in the policy circles. So I just wanted to get that field-based input into your study and how that would change that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Samita. Are there others? I saw there were a couple of clarifications in the chat function. So just to share, Victoria had asked how 35% of tenants could be landless and how is tenancy defined in this case. And they're landless in the terms of ownership of land. So they're entirely leasing in their agricultural land holdings. And then Subhash had asked why the suicide rate was higher among tenants, and the Dia and Pranav had responded that that was because tenants have a harder time accessing credit because of the lack of land records. And when they do access credit, it's typically at higher rates. So they have higher levels of distress when they are unable to pay back their loans. Dong Q has just entered a comment. I agree that your recommendation develop a land lease database system. What kind of document as legal proof can be registered if the land lease database system is established? Does landowner give receipts to tenants? What would happen if the landowner refuses to grant such receipts? A very good question. Can we collect maybe 2 or 3 more questions and then we'll have Pranav respond? Okay, if those are the burning questions for right now, Pranav, would you like to respond to Namita Dong Q's questions?
Thanks, Namita and Dong. Namita, yes, we are looking at this corporate angle also, like contract farming at the corporate angle. So we'll share the findings around that. And as you told correctly, this part of study is pure text study. We're going to Maharashtra and Odisha for a deep dive into the field issues, and hopefully we'll be able to refine these findings there. And regarding this tenancy laws, we have we have put together all the different kind of tenancy contestant laws, and we are trying to develop a kind of GIS maps of these state-wise maps based on the laws and the tenant situation. So that will be also available. The study did look at tribal land right. We discussed a lot with Mercedes around forest rights, but the scope of study is limited. We are not looking at forest right as part of this study. There may be another study which will be looking at tribal and forest right. Coming to Dong's question, the exciting question. See, this database system we're looking at 2 ways. One is which is based on some kind of evidence coming from land lessee and lessor, where the kind of question you have raised, like some kind of receipt, and we find there is issue around that. So for example, the paddy procurement database and also license cultivator database based require some kind of writing, like in writing either between lessee and lessor, or some certification by the local revenue officer or panchayat, local self-governance institution doing that. So that can be one way, like either the lessee and lessor they write together, or a third party like panchayat, which is more like in land license cultivator database, like in the Gram Sabha meeting in a village assembly, this is to discuss and endorsed. Third thing is that whether some existing database can be used instead of collecting new such records. For example, this agriculture census database I was referring to, it follows FAO standard and it collects in most of the states, which are called land record states in India, the tenancy information of whole population. And it is every 5 years they collect and they prepare a table as per that to develop land holding database, and they show that. So their report is available in public domain in a aggregated form based on a sub-district level data. But that database being available in the background, we had a discussion during the last World Bank study with the agriculture census director, who was telling that if government wants, that data can be released. So if that data can be released from there itself, in many ways we can get tenancy data. So we did not. Yeah, there is another question has come from Yugan Goel. Yeah, this Tenancy Model Act has been, as I told, it has been implemented in 4 states, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, and UP. Because we did a desk work, so far there has not been much information in public domain, neither even popular press or academic or media literature. So that is very limited. So we have to probably go to the field to collect those data and see what is the impact. So that's why we looked at Andhra Pradesh, where there are some data available in peer-reviewed journals.
Okay, great. Thanks for those clarifications. I see Dia would like to raise a point in the open discussion, which we'll come to shortly. And Yugang Goyal had a question: how has the impact of the Tenancy Model Act been in states where it has been implemented, or is it too early to estimate it? Pranav, do you want to take that maybe as the last clarificatory question, and then after this we'll move to Dr. Padhi's remarks and the open discussion? Thank you, Yugang. My audio got disconnected. Okay, in that case, Dr. Padhi, Pranav, would you like to introduce Dr. Padhi?
Yeah, thank you, Mercedes. So, as Dr. Padhi introduced himself, he is a career bureaucrat. He belongs to Indian Administrative Services from Odisha cadre. He also is an agricultural scientist, having a PhD in agricultural entomology from a premier Indian institute, IARI. And he was also state director for agriculture in Odisha. As a collector, he has been instrumental in addressing many land related issues in tribal Odisha. And right now he is contributing in a very meaningful way through his experience to agriculture policy discourse in India, being part of ICRISAT and different committees with ICAR. So can I request Dr. Padhi to have his remarks on this?
Thank you, Mercedes, and thank you, Pranav, for this very generous introduction. I just have interest in the agri policy space, so that's how I'm connected to this. In fact, Pranav made a very good presentation around the topic of this consultation, and also Dr. Haq told about the land leasing reforms and all that. Let me repeat that earlier, post-independence, land leasing was a symbol of feudal agrarian structure. It is no more that, and it's very good that at least by the think tanks, by the Apex think tank in India, NITI Aayog, everyone is now conclusively recognizing land leasing as an economic necessity, as Pranav told in the beginning. So having said that, now how could we include the land tenancy in the agriculture and rural development schemes? I would not like to repeat the stuff that Pranav has already presented some time back. I'll just touch upon few points which Pranav just, he pointed out, but would not elaborate. First of all, let me make it clear that the public services and entitlements in India, in many schemes, they are linked to the land ownership. Whether you take any scheme, whether PM Kisan or any agriculture development schemes, they are all linked to the land ownership. And that's where this land leasing or the women and tenant farmers, the issues come in. Pranav, I would just like to begin with the NREGS, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which is the largest wage employment scheme anywhere in the planet. This is a very informed audience online, and many of you would be knowing that land development of the SC, ST or the marginal farmers, that is a permissible activity under the NREGS. But when we prepare the work plan by the Panchayati Raj bodies, whether it is a Panchayat or a Block Panchayat or the Jilla Panchayat, we don't find many such schemes in operation. This is my first observation. Pranav, I would just like to correct you that in PM Kisan, you told that it is only covering small and marginal farmers. In fact, in Modi 2.0, the first cabinet decision was that it would be applicable to all farmers. So it's no more linked to the small and marginal farmers. So all the farmers, irrespective of their land holding sizes, are eligible to have benefit as far as my knowledge goes. But you are right that the tenant farmers or the sharecroppers or the lessee cultivators, they are excluded from this benefit. But you are again right that schemes like Kalia, the state-specific income support scheme in Odisha, they cover the tenant farmers. But interestingly, I also come from Odisha. Interestingly, they give monetary benefit through some kind of PRI endorsement, but the land leasing is not permissible as per the Odisha Land Reforms Act. That is very interesting. So that calls for kind of policy action from states like Odisha and many others. On a third point that I would like to touch upon, you told that Panchayati Raj institutions could be involved in the land leasing process, in the record keeping and other stuff. But to my mind, I have also been the director of the Panchayati Raj in the home state. And I have seen the capacity of the existing functionaries, Gram Panchayat secretaries, is very low. So if at all, I'm always for giving more and more, devolution of the powers or the decentralized governance going to the Panchayati Raj institutions. But the prerequisite should be that we need to build the capacity of the PRIs, and also should give them the 3 F's that we always tell: the funds, functions, and the functionaries. If we give a particular subject for implementation and they do not have the capacitated the functionaries, it would not be kind of good to implement. So at this stage, I would suggest that till that capacity is built, or in those Panchayati, there would be many states where maybe the capacity might be there, like Kerala, Karnataka, and few others. They could directly go for it. But till that time, because land revenue being a state subject and agriculture also is a state subject, so till that time the capacity is built, because record keeping, land revenue record keeping is a very emotive issue. The tenants or the farmers or the citizens, they themselves would not like it will be handled by an institution who would not be having capacity. So let us let us build the capacity and also simultaneously go for this when we talk about the agriculture or the rural development schemes. You told that they did not wait for the comprehensive legal reforms. Maybe it would be debatable, because it is something which is very difficult to implement. I have been a district collector and also have seen the implementation in my earlier capacities as an SDM or the Deputy Commissioner. It would not be very easy to give this particular function to the Panchayati Raj institutions. Then you also spoke about the NRLM, the rural development schemes. There are many rural development experts. I could see Samik and many others from the World Bank, and they have seen we implemented the livelihoods programs, and we have seen as to how through this self-help group movement, particularly the women SHGs, the financial inclusion could be achieved. And we have also seen the sociological and economic empowerment, and in many cases also political empowerment. Just for the information of the audience, one of the members of parliament from Odisha is an SHG leader. So that way, that could be a good pathway to lead this particular move as to how this land rights and records which are legalistically there but not being implemented. Then next 2-3 points that I would like to make before I would go to COVID, which you did not touch, Pranav. the land policy framework that, of course, Dr. Huck mentioned, that he told that in a particular state, few officials are against it. I would differ with him. I would say that there is a lack of political will. It is an extremely volatile issue and a very sensitive subject for the political dynamics to take it forward. So how do we take it? Maybe some kind of advocacy, some kind of maybe through the legal framework, some kind of PIL or something might move. You yourself told that after the Model Land Leasing Act circulated by the Niti Aayog, only 4 states have gone. But Pranav, I have interest in this particular subject. I have not seen much implementation progress even in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, MP, or Maharashtra. I would be, I would wait for your some kind of information that on this subject. Then everybody talks about it, but then how do we push it? In fact, I would just draw for the Indian audience that the finance minister in her last budget speech, she began when she spoke about the 16 points agenda that state governments should be encouraged to implement this kind of the structural reforms like the land leasing or the APMC Act, etc. But there is no incentivization defined in that particular speech or subsequently by the respective departments. So if a particular state is given some kind of incentives to implement such reforms, because even though agriculture is a state subject, entire money on the PM Kisan or the fertilizer subsidies and many other plethora of schemes that they flow from the center to the states. So if there is some conditionality of some kind of incentivization to the states, to those states who would be going for these reforms, that will be very useful. Last, I would just like to come back to this very critical situation around COVID-19. And this pandemic, of course, fortunately has not much affected the agriculture sector as of now, because Rabi harvest is going on well and the Kharif preparations are on. Many state governments have been proactive to take to lift some restrictions on the agriculture sector. I personally hope that it would not be impacted as it was apprehended earlier. And there is a monsoon forecast by IMD which will be normal in the coming Kharif. But the informality of labor that we talked about, that is again we have to see, because the returning migrants, the migrant laborers who went back to the states, I personally see that they may not come back to the cities or the peri-urban space or the factories immediately. They are going to stay back for some time. Evidences I have not come, but that is my personal presumption. And the second one, that I would also presume that the laborers who are still stuck up, the lockdown in India is till 3rd of May. I personally apprehend that many of them may also go back after 3rd of May once the transportation facilities are resumed. So when such an informal labor force goes back to the rural scenario, so how do they get engaged? And obviously many of them would take into lease in lands in the agriculture sector. How in absence of a land lease market, formal land lease market, how would it operate, and how the pandemic plays out in the years to come? This is a big kind of thing that we need to look at. So these are a few of the points that I wanted to make at this stage. If there are any other questions, I would come in. But I would like to thank you and the team for a very good study. And I thank all of you.